Hey guys, it's Godbars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 140th episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it had, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. Once again, we're at the end of a set, and for once I'm actually kind of excited for that because now we get to talk about one of the most beloved late legends to ever have graced the genre, Biz Markie. While it's already been about 4 years since he passed, even though it doesn't feel like it, he made such a strong impression and impact on the culture that his legacy and many contributions to hip hop will never even come close to being forgotten. Unfortunately, it seems like the only full album of his to be on streaming services is 2003's Weekend Warrior, but the LP I wanted to discuss today comes in the form of Bismarck's classic 1988 debut, Goin' Off. While this and the projects that followed, for the most part, have to be heard on YouTube or Google if you don't buy a physical copy, I would definitely recommend making the effort of not just checking out this album, but its 1989 follow-up, The Biz Never Sleeps, as well as 1991's I Need a Haircut and 1993's All Samples Cleared. His first album here was released in the midst of the Juice Crew era, where I mentioned in previous videos he was in the scheme-changing collective alongside fellow legends like Cool G Rap, Big Daddy Kane, Masta Ace, Roxanne Shante, Craig G, MC Shan, and Marley Marl. Marley actually did all the beats for Biz Markie's debut here, which is hardly a surprise when you consider he did the bulk, if not all of the instrumentals on gems like my last video subject, LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, Here Come the Lords by Lords of the Underground, Take a Look Around by Masta Ace, Intelligent Hoodlum by Tragedy Gaddafi, Cool G Rap and DJ Polo's Road to the Riches, and BDK's debut, which was another album I covered in this group. And that's still just a fraction of his work. So to say that Marley had a hand in carving out the popular sound of the Golden Age is a serious understatement. He was without a doubt one of the people who forged and nourished the sound of not just an era, but what would grow to be an entire culture. The only feature in the mix on Going Off here is TJ Swan, though from my research it does interestingly seem like Big Daddy Kane had a role as an engineer for certain singles, as he's actually one of the names credited for the album's mixing. However, you hardly need me to delve into the background of these songs, as the Biz himself actually breaks down the entire LP, track by track, in Brian Coleman's book Check the Technique. But despite his hilarious acting roles and other non-hip-hop endeavors, personally, whenever I think of beatboxing, traditionally the first person that comes to mind, other than Dougie Fresh of course, is Biz Markie. It's an aspect of the culture I don't really hear too many people talk about, and I think most of us just don't think about how beatboxing is another one of those things that grew kind of up and away from hip-hop, for better or worse. On one hand, you have dudes like Verbal Ace, who must have had some base level of appreciation for these pioneers that came before him, at the very least acknowledging the door that they opened with this art form. All memes aside, the guy does some pretty cool stuff with beatboxing, which has led him and others to be able to make a living while evolving this art form that began as a neat skill. On the other hand, though, I personally can't think of the last time I really saw a current rapper incorporating beatboxing into their music, or even just doing that as a hobby on the side. I'm not sure why that is, but it isn't really too different from battle rap or breakdancing, where despite having huge fan bases in their own right, it all evolved from the same b-boy elements that Biz Markie cut his teeth with. But as talented as he was in that department, his proficiency with beatboxing was just one aspect of what made Bismarck's stage presence so incomparable. His sense of humor was unlike anyone before or since, and it not only made him a crowd favorite for live performances, but it showed up constantly on his debut full-length here as well. From the very first track, we're greeted with a song themed around picking your nose, which I feel illustrates my earlier point of this dude being completely one of a kind and out of the box, which was pretty forward thinking and ahead of his time when you consider it even preceded the native tongues entirely, with Going Off dropping before De La Soul's debut and even Jungle Brothers' debut. I can't imagine that there were too many rappers having fun and not taking themselves seriously in the way that Biz was able to. He wasn't somebody who had his time in the sun and then retired to observe the game from afar. He stayed active musically even after becoming a superstar, and while he without a doubt had a tendency to over exaggerate, from what I could tell, he seemed to have the densest hip hop collection by a pretty large margin, at least when it actually comes to rappers who had a hand in the genre themselves. I've previously brought up the podcast that Questlove of the Roots heads, along with people like Fonte of Little Brother and a few other friends. And I'll probably continue to bring it up in future episodes as it's one of my favorite hip hop related platforms. Honestly, while I'm obviously a big fan of some of Noriega's music, I personally feel like Questlove Supreme deserves the type of attention that Drink Champs gets. And I only think that it doesn't get that nod because despite running at full capacity for about a decade now, it doesn't have that visual element for people who don't like podcasts to watch on YouTube. I think the specific situation that really made me realize this gap in quality is when you listen to either show interview MC Search of Third Base specifically about the hit that MC Hammer had placed on him and Pete Nice upon their arrival in California. If you don't know that story, I would recommend listening to him tell it on Questlove Supreme, as Search is one of those dudes like Fat Joe or Tony Yayo, where they really should look into narrating audiobooks or something, because they can keep you on the edge of your seat for an hour with just one tale. On that platform, you get this frankly insane story where Quest and the crew are being the perfect audience, but then you compare that to Nori and DJFN, where MC Search tries to give them the same story, but he's pretty much forced to just give up because Nori just can't really handle his liquor and they kind of stomp out the story before it even really gets told. I bring this up because Biz Markie went on Quest podcast and it remains one of my favorite episodes to this day, as not only is Biz absolutely hilarious as always, but he really shows off his encyclopedic knowledge of hip hop, as well as the myriad of collectibles he accrued over the years, which meant for once in his lifetime, Questlove wasn't the biggest collector at the table. Big Daddy Kane may have been the one writing for Biz here, at least for the first 5 tracks, but I don't really think it matters since he never presented himself as some lyrical mastermind or the best MC to ever live. It was his personality that the world fell in love with. Just like how Ice Cube was writing for Eazy-E at the same time on the other side of the country, it's important to remember that regardless of who penned them, the words mean nothing if they aren't delivered by someone who knows how to execute them. While the killer debut LP here already had some pretty notable moments that were setting Biz apart, it wouldn't be until the following year that he really made his mark with the smash hit single Just a Friend, without a doubt becoming the most commercially successful and well-known song under his belt. I think too many people either forget or just overlook how important it was for someone like Biz, who had no background in singing to my knowledge, to come out swinging with a melodic hook he's just belting at the top of his lungs with all the emotion he can muster. Whether you see the direct lineage or not, I feel like this opened the door for dudes like Kanye down the line who had no business singing and aren't exactly technically proficient at it, but at least occasionally can make it work through the feeling outweighing technique. It really doesn't matter if Biz is hitting all the notes or not. I genuinely don't think the chorus would be made 1% better with some trained professional Broadway singer, because that would take away from how the verses and hook connect and support each other. Even though that track doesn't appear on Going Off as I mentioned before, the ideas Biz played around with on his debut were essential building blocks for the shape of his character and identity as not just an artist, but an icon and figure whose name will be preserved just as long as the term hip hop itself. For this one, I'm going to get my 3 favorite tracks out of the way first, those being Biz's Going Off, Vapors, and Make the Music with Your Mouth Biz. For honorable mentions on this relatively short but classic LP, I think I'd probably have to go with Al B Square Mall, Biz Dance Part 1, Nobody Beats the Biz, and The Return of the Biz Dance. Thank you for watching my 140th video. We're now at the end of another group of Golden Age classics. And the album I'm going to start this next 2000s group off with is an LP that would have been probably my first video if I had it back then. So tune in to see that personal favorite that I've been dying to get to. And if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite tracks off this late Legends debut are. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.